After preparing a little food for him, Turan said that his household was poor and he had nothing much to offer. While gulping the food down, the man said, "This already counts as a feast." Then he asked Turan, "Have you never seen people from outside the village?" Turan replied, "That's right. I grew up on this mountain from childhood, living only by herding sheep, and there are rarely outsiders in this small town either." Those words made the man lift his eyes toward Turan, finding him very interesting. Because for a shepherd who had grown up here since childhood, Turan was far too familiar with proper manners. The man praised Turan's parents, saying they must have taught him well. Turan said that his mother had taught him all of that, but she had passed away a few years ago. Regretfully, the man made a gesture of prayer and said that having raised such a proud son as Turan, she must surely be proud in heaven. He then thanked Turan once again. Turan said he was only living in the way his mother had taught him, then asked curiously, "Why did you come running to such a remote countryside place?" The man told Turan that someone had asked him to help deal with a leopard-like monster. The moment Turan heard those words, his whole body froze on the spot. He immediately pressed on. "You're the wizard the village chief mentioned, aren't you?" The other man admitted it straightforwardly. "I am that wizard. Now, may I ask you a question?" Turan did not hesitate and nodded at once. The man then asked. He had sensed that the monster was in this area, yet he had found no trace of it. Even stranger, although Turan clearly knew about the village chief and the monster, he remained calm and had not even fled. If that monster were going to attack a human, the first one it would target would definitely be him. Was he really not afraid? For a shepherd who had never left this little town, he was far too unusual and far too brave. "So who exactly are you? Are you a wizard?" Those words dragged Turan's memory back to the days when his mother was still alive. Back then, he had asked his mother, "Why must no one ever know that I am a wizard?" His mother had told him it was all because of those evil nobles. If nobles are compared to shepherds, then knights are like the dogs raised by shepherds. They may love you as if you were family, but when needed, they will sell you or even sacrifice you. So I don't want you to live that kind of life. Turan, do you want to keep living like this with your mother forever? If you do, then remember this. Never let anyone know that you are a wizard, especially other wizards. Once they discover it, they will tear us apart, turn you into their sheepdog, and cast you aside whenever necessary. To keep from being recognized, you may even be forced to kill people. At that moment, the man asked again, "Why aren't you saying anything? Did my joke just now go too far?" After saying that, he scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Turan was silent for a moment, then apologized in a low voice, saying that he did not really understand humor. The man shook his head and said that he was the one who should apologize. "Sorry, I shouldn't have joked like that just now." Turan forced out a slight smile and said it was his first time hearing a wizard make a joke, so he had not reacted right away. The man said Turan's reaction had been so interesting that he could not help teasing him a little, though it really had gone a bit too far. After saying that, he held out his hand to Turan and said that after talking for so long, they still had not properly introduced themselves. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am the traveler Keorn." Turan also reached out and shook his hand. "My name is Turan. I'm a shepherd and I'm 18 this year." Keorn casually stated his age, 75. Turan froze for a moment and asked, "You don't look that old." Keorn said that wizards lived longer than ordinary people and also aged more slowly. Turan then asked him why he had become a traveler. Keorn said that he had served the Albion family for 60 years and later chose to leave, wanting to spend his later years wandering everywhere and living a free life. And so the two exchanged their own stories. For the first time in Turan's life, he was chatting with someone this easily. Without realizing it, evening was already approaching. Keorn stood up and said that he should be going. He reached out and placed a silver coin on the dining table, saying it was an Arab silver coin, one of the purest silver coins, and more than enough to pay for the meal. Turan also stood and thanked him. "May your hunt go smoothly in every way." Keorn walked to the door, then turned back and told Turan that he would probably be staying here for the next few days, so he might come by again to mooch a few more meals. A few days later, as usual, Turan drove the flock up to the hillside to graze. And once they had eaten and drunk their fill, he shouted, "Gather!" At once, the sheep all around raised their heads and moved toward Turan. Even now, Turan was still immersed in the previous conversation, his mood unusually light. This was the first time he had met a wizard, and also the first time he had talked with someone so freely. Keorn always spoke with easy humor, and his way of speaking and breadth of knowledge far surpassed the adults in the village. And over the past few days together, Turan had also confirmed one thing. Keorn really was a good man. In the past, Turan had always believed that knights were nothing more than merciless tools trained by arrogant nobles. But Turan did not know how to tell Keorn that there was no longer any monster on Mount Hyzron. Meanwhile, Keorn was searching the mountain forest for traces of the monster. What made him feel that something was wrong was that clear signs of battle remained here, yet he could not sense the slightest trace of the monster's aura. Could it already have been hunted down? But who had done it? He could not help letting out a sigh of relief. He did not care who had killed it. As long as this place was safe, that was what mattered most. But at that moment, Keorn suddenly sensed something unusual, and he spun around sharply. A sharp claw instantly came right before his eyes, and the owner of that claw was a hideous monster. A huge wound split open its skull, and tiny fangs had grown around the edges of the wound. Keorn's heart sank as he muttered in confusion, "The wraith of a monster? Who on earth did this?" Before he could sort out his thoughts, the monster's claw thrust straight at him, and with a loud bang, it smashed heavily into the spot where Keorn had been standing just moments before. A chill ran through Keorn after narrowly surviving the first strike. Why had that wizard not absorbed or dispersed the magic power in the corpse? Logically, any wizard who hunted a monster should have known that. Yet he had allowed the corpse to turn into a wraith. Unless he was just a novice knight who did not know the common rule, that if magic power is not absorbed, it will become a wraith. Or perhaps they had some other purpose. But whatever the reason, he had to destroy it now. At once, a golden arrow condensed in Keorn's palm and shot straight toward the monster. But the moment the golden arrow touched the monster, it shattered directly into powder. Keorn's pupils contracted. My magic is ineffective. Could its magic power be far above mine? In the next instant, the monster vanished from before Keorn's eyes. Keorn quickly swept his gaze around, trying to determine where it had gone. At that moment, a string of bubbles rose from his shadow. Immediately after, a grotesque claw suddenly shot out from beneath the shadow. At the very instant the claw was about to hit him, Keorn barely reacted in time and narrowly dodged it. Lowering his head to look at the wound on his hand, he was shaken to the core. This was not a level that some mere knight could handle at all. At the very least, only a lower-ranking noble would stand a chance. He had never expected to encounter a monster wraith of this level in such a remote mountain village. Life truly was full of surprises. He lowered his head at once and made up his mind. He would not die like this. Even if he had to die, he would take it down with him. He forced all his magic power into his palm, preparing to pierce its vital point. The instant the monster lunged, at the very moment the monster once again formed its claws and Keorn was about to unleash his strongest killing move, a blue light suddenly flashed through the forest. And in the next second, it pierced straight through the monster's head. Keorn stared at the scene before him in shock. The wraith that had been absurdly powerful just moments ago had simply collapsed like that. Then a voice sounded by his ear. Are you all right? When Keorn saw that it was Turan, he said in a low voice, the shepherd is a wizard. That kind of joke really can get someone killed. So Turan, you really are a wizard. As he reeled in the whip in his hand, Turan calmly admitted it. Keorn frowned and asked why he had not told him earlier. Seeing Turan remain silent, Keorn changed his words. Then let me ask a different question. Why did you save me just now? You could have just walked away. Turan muttered quietly. Maybe because I'm kind. He remembered that earlier conversation he had had with Keorn. Back then, Turan had asked Keorn why he would go so far. With his abilities, earning much more money would have been effortless. So why had he still agreed to come hunt the monster for the village chief? Keorn had smiled. Because they are pitiful people, living in such a remote place without even basic protection. How could they not be pitiful? Hearing that, Turan had replied, but that's not your fault. Yet Keorn had said, wizards are born inheriting the power of the gods, so they ought to protect those who are unarmed. Of course, not all wizards think that way. But in my view, every person ought to have their own beliefs and their own way of living. So Turan repeated those words now. Every person ought to have their own beliefs and their own way of living. But at that moment, the wraith that had already collapsed suddenly sprang up again and lunged at them once more. After the two of them dodged the attack, Keorn immediately made Turan understand clearly. This monster's level was not something they could confront head-on. Unless one was a noble, no one could face it directly. He told Turan to notify the village chief and evacuate the villagers at once. As for himself, he would stay here and hold it off. He knew he was overreaching and he had no idea how long he could last. But he still chose to stand his ground. Turan said only one thing. It's all right. After saying that, he activated the magic power within him. Watching Turan's movements, Keorn was shaken. So that strike just now had not even been his full strength. A young knight hidden away in the mountains could actually hunt a wraith that even nobles had to treat with caution. This was the judgment of the old knight Keorn at that moment. Because what he saw before him was neither the bluff of a mountain boy nor the reckless impulse of a fugitive knight. What entered his sight at that moment might well become the beginning of something that would overturn the world of wizards. The stones on the ground around them slowly rose into the air under Turan's control. At that moment, Turan wanted to confirm only one thing. Where exactly was his limit? Keorn beside him no longer hesitated either. He said he could not let Turan fight alone. No matter how great his talent, that thing was extremely difficult to deal with. They had to join forces if they wanted any chance of winning. But with a loud bang, Keorn realized that he would only get in the way. He had not even had time to react to Turan's last move. Realizing that he could not help, Keorn made an important decision to let Turan's talent fully bloom at this very moment. While Turan kept dodging the wraith's attacks, Keorn shouted, "A wraith can't be killed by physical attacks." Turan immediately pressed, "Then what should I use?" Keorn answered, "Fire or lightning." No sooner had he spoken than Turan formed a massive flame on the wraith's body, but the fire failed to stir even the slightest effect. Turan said in a low voice, "This is completely useless." Only then did Keorn realize that Turan did not even understand the most basic common knowledge of wizards. At that moment, a terrifying suspicion flashed through Keorn's mind. Could this wraith have been left behind after Turan killed the monster? If so, that would mean Turan had never absorbed any magic power in his entire life. Keorn immediately told Turan, "Don't let the fire cling to its body first. Compress the flames into a ball, then shoot it out." In the next second, a small fireball formed in Turan's palm. Turan raised his hand and pointed toward the sky, and the small fireball suddenly began spinning faster. Then he stepped forward with his left foot and hurled the fireball fiercely at the monster with his right hand. With a bang, the wraith's entire body instantly burst into roaring flames. From not far away, Keorn immediately shouted, Don't relax. Keep pouring in magic power and burn this wraith until not a trace of it remains. Turan did as he said, letting the blazing fire continue devouring its form. Watching this, Keorn finally let out a breath of relief. They had won. That powerful wraith, one that required at least noble-level strength to contend with, had been dealt with just like that. And it had been done by a shepherd boy from a remote mountain village. Keorn then urged Turan, if you don't want to encounter another wraith, absorb its magic power at once. Hearing that, Turan asked him how to do it. Keorn said, stand in front of the corpse and imagine pulling something into your body. As Turan slowly closed his eyes and imagined it as Keorn instructed, strands of green light rose from the monster's remains and flowed into Turan's palm. The moment Turan opened his eyes, he felt as though a strange and powerful force had been poured throughout his body. And Keorn, standing behind him, spoke as well. Do you feel a kind of pleasure welling up from inside your body? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it. This is actually your first time absorbing magic power. After awakening, magic power grows slowly with age. But the fastest way to increase it is to kill monsters or wizards and absorb their magic power. That made Keorn find it hard to believe. Without ever having absorbed any magic power, Turan had still been able to wield magic of that level. Such talent was simply terrifying. Keorn called out Turan's name. I apologize for my earlier rudeness. May I ask, which family do you come from? The words, which family, left Turan confused, but he still reminded Keorn, you should deal with your wound first. Only then did Keorn remember that his arm was still bleeding without stopping. After returning to his dwelling, Turan simply bandaged his wound for him. Looking completely at ease, Keorn said softly, how strange. Someone as noble as you would actually do something like this for me. Turan answered helplessly, I've told you many times, I'm not noble. I'm just a shepherd who doesn't even know who his real father is. So stop saying things like that. Seeing Turan's eyes fixed straight on him, Keorn finally agreed slowly, though he still felt puzzled inside. Why would a wizard as strong as Turan be a shepherd? Of course, he did not mean it as an insult. He simply felt that such a life did not suit Turan. Turan told him that it had been his mother's dying wish from as far back as he could remember. She had made him live that way until the very moment she passed away. Keorn listened in astonishment, completely unable to understand why she would leave such a wish behind. Then Turan seriously explained it to him using the very words his mother had once given him. Looking at him, Keorn said, your mother's decision was very wise. Those words stunned Turan. He had thought Keorn would say it was merely overprotection, but Keorn denied that. Wizards truly possessed great power, but power inevitably invited conflict. More than 20 years ago, several noble families had erupted into a great war. The Albion family, whom Keorn had served, had once gone to war with the Zahar family, and far too many people had died in that conflict. Of the more than 3,000 Albion knights who fought in that war, over 900 were killed. Even crueler, every person close to Keorn had been among those 900. His friend always said that after the war, he would open a laundry shop. His teacher was always scolding him, saying he still had a long way to go. And his beloved wife and son, they were slaughtered by the Zahar family. Until in the end, he alone was left alive. So, in a sense, your mother had been right. The life of a knight sometimes disappears more easily than that of a commoner and can more easily become meaningless. But she was also wrong about one thing. He paused. She underestimated your talent. It may not be very dignified for me to say this in my current state, but I really was once considered a fairly skilled knight. Yet compared with someone like you who has never absorbed any magic power, I am nothing at all. You should understand how strong your talent is. At the very least, you have talent on the level of a noble. Even among nobles, you would count as top tier. Turan listened in a daze. Could it be that his father had not been a knight? Keorn slowly rose to his feet. In very rare cases, nobles can also give birth to children with poor talent. Knights can also produce children with noble-level talent. So, in a sense, I actually think it would be best for you to leave this place and see the world outside. Turan asked him why, and Keorn answered, humanity needed more nobles and knights, because humanity has not yet truly become the master of this world. A long time ago, the other races banished by the gods were still waiting in the shadows for a chance to return. But the nobles of today care only about fighting among themselves. That is why this age needs powerful and kind nobles like Turan even more. Of course, the most important thing is, you probably aren't satisfied with being only a shepherd anymore, are you? Turan was silent for a moment, then asked, if I left the mountain, what could I gain? Keorn said, that depends on what you want. Fame, power, or friendship, those things are hard to obtain here. You could travel everywhere as I do, eliminating monsters that threaten humanity. You could also become an adventurer, exploring the unknown, or be adopted by some family, and step onto the path of power. Only then did Turan truly understand what Keorn meant. Those things really were more attractive than herding sheep every day. Turan thanked Keorn. This was the first time he had felt genuine curiosity about the outside world. Keorn said he would support whichever path Turan chose. Then he asked Turan, what is your bloodline ability? Seeing Turan's face full of confusion, Keorn seemed to remember something and immediately added, sorry, I keep forgetting that you actually don't understand magic. A bloodline ability was a trait that nobles inherited from their ancestor, the Frians. Whether or not one had a bloodline ability was also an important standard for distinguishing nobles from knights. He formed a small fireball in his palm and asked Turan, when you use magic, is there any kind of spell that comes especially easily to you, or do you have some particularly unusual ability? After hearing that, Turan began sorting through the possibilities Cain had mentioned. Then he told Cain that his sense of smell was very sharp, and that he was especially accurate at throwing stones. Cain said that if his sense of smell was abnormally strong, then it was very likely a bloodline ability. Skill with projectile weapons was one of the Albion family specialties, but that was actually considered a very common talent. Cain continued asking for more specific details, but after Turan finished explaining them, he saw Cain's expression darken at once. What is it? Cain said quietly that he might know which family Turan's bloodline was closest to. It was a powerful family known as pursuers, and also as hunters. Zahar. It was also the same family that had once slaughtered the Albion family in war. Those words left Turan frozen on the spot. He had never imagined that his family was actually Zahar, the very family that had killed all of Cain's loved ones. For a moment, Turan did not know what he should say to Cain. Should he apologize? But those acts had been committed by relatives he had never even met. To him, they were almost the crimes of strangers. Cain suddenly spoke. Turan, you don't need to make that kind of face. You did not personally take part in that war. Turan understood what Cain meant, yet still did not know how to respond. Cain put on his usual restrained smile again, and said that this was the predicament of adults. If people always wanted to wash blood with blood and repay hatred with hatred, then conflict would never end. Turan asked Cain, then regarding me wanting to go down the mountain, do you feel no regret? Cain patted Turan on the shoulder and said, if you go down the mountain and pursue power, then in the end you will very likely join the Zahar family. Someone with your talent is bound to attract attention. But I trust your character. You saved me and even exposed the identity you had meant to hide all your life. So I believe that if you enter Zahar and even rise to a high position, then perhaps you could instead prevent the next terrible war. But you do not need to force yourself to decide right now, and you still have not decided to join Zahar. At that moment, Turan said that he thought he might have made up his mind. He wanted to try going down the mountain, but not yet. He would leave after Cain's injury had improved somewhat. Cain said it was only a scratch, but he did not refuse Turan's kindness.